Thank you for joining us on another Canary coaching session. My name is Jeff Nepper. I work as the Executive Director of Business Development here at Canary, and I'm really glad that you've taken the time to join us on this Wednesday. Today, we're talking about how to use the Calc and Event server to create events. This is the third installment of the Calcs and Events coaching sessions. And if you haven't had a chance to watch the 101 or the 201 course, we would encourage you to do so from the Help Center or on the Canary YouTube channel. So Calcs 301, the events feature. I want to cover a few of the key features that you can find for events within the Canary admin. Quickly, to frame this, this would be a feature that system administrators would use to configure rules, to watch the historic data or real-time data for event triggers. So rules that you define to start an event, rules that you define to end an event. And you can do this inside of the Calcs and Events service. You can also create event properties. And properties are simply metrics that are measured across the duration of the event. This can be things like analytics, statistical data, or other things that you'd like to measure. And you can apply these events to both individual tags or across asset types as they've been defined inside of your virtual views. Once the event database is configured, it is automatically written to a SQLite DB that is installed with Canary, but you can also configure to have your events written to your own Microsoft SQL database. You can email individuals or email groups anytime an event begins. You can read the events into other Canary client tools like Axiom and the Excel add-in and display the event history and properties in table format. Of course, because we are writing to a SQL database, other systems can access that database and you can query that database directly. All right, let's run through how to set this up. We'll start by opening the Canary administrator, finding the Calcs and Events. As you've seen in previous lessons, we've built out multiple calculations. Each line represents a different calculation. And if any events are tied to these calculations, I can tell from the bell icon. Let's start by creating a new event. For our first example, we're not going to tie this to an asset. Instead, we will simply watch all of the data on value change. The first thing I'll need to do is configure the tag or the rules that I would like to watch. So this could be a complex expression, or it could be something as simple as a tag. I have a tag that is a manual entry tag through Axiom called process running. It's a tag I can trigger. And so if this is equal to true, then I want to create an event start. Let's duplicate this rule and say that if it's equal to false, I want to end my event. We give you the ability to configure both the start and the end separately. In this example, I don't really need to define the end trigger as being false, since the start trigger is when it's equal to true. If I did not have this expression, the event would still end when the start trigger is no longer valid. In this case, when the Boolean is no longer true. We do give you the option, though, to create a different end trigger than the opposite of the start trigger. This is useful so that if you, maybe you were doing a high value of 100 on a tag, you may not want to stop your event when the value drops back below 100. In fact, it may sit there and flutter right at 100, up and down, above 100. So you might say that you might set the reset point or the stop point of the event to be a value of, say, 95. So for that reason, we give you the ability to do both. So on that very simple rule, I could hit apply, close, and then deploy my event. Now, one thing I did not show was that I have the option, if I wanted to backfill and look at history, I could. I'm not going to do that in this case. So we hit play, we're in live mode, and we can see that it's active and that we have no events in progress, no events since start, and no events in the database. Let's flip over to Axiom. This is an Axiom application I've built that allows me to trigger the value of this tag. So my event process is currently not running. I'm in false. Let's trigger this to true. And let's take a look over at our event. We can see that we've evaluated twice and that we currently have an event in progress. By clicking on the bell icon, I can view the database. I can see that I've started the event at 1:37:25. There is no end time, which means it's still active. And the duration will update every minute by hitting the refresh button. There's my 23 seconds in. So now if I come back and stop the event by changing the value to false, this event will end. It's no longer in progress, and it's showing that there's one event in the database. So now when we refresh, we can see a start, an end, a duration of 48 seconds. Notice that the source field is empty, the notify field is empty, start and end offset are empty, and there's no properties or tags being associated. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about those features. We can open this and edit it. So one of the options that I can do is I can say notify email. Now, whenever an event starts, an email will go out notifying this mailing list. Additionally, I can add another expression and take this expression and code it to an event property. An event property allows me to write a rule that will post-event run some analytics on the duration. So let's do something very simple here. And we will associate a pump that's running. So we'll call this our flow average. So I'll search through here. I'll look for Hayes Station 1, Pump 1. Well, there's the tag. If you remember from our previous calc lessons, I have a series of functions that I can call. This one will do our time average 2. I'll just reorder this. So function, open parenthesis, single quote, tag inside of brackets, single quote end, comma, space. This is normally inside of a function where I would put an amount of time, say 1h for 1 hour inside of a single quote. But for an event property, I replace the typical duration with event duration, camel cased, no quote. So what this will now do is once I've applied, when I run at my next event, I will receive an analytic property that tells me what the average, time average 2 of the flow tag for this pump was for the duration of that event. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And while I'm here, we'll also do a min. Just change the function from memory. My minimum. We can run a max. Maximum 2. So we have our average, our min, our max. And of course, from the function list, I have over 70 different functions that I could. So if I wanted to understand my quality scores for this tag, or maybe standard deviation, or I wanted to understand perhaps a amount of time that my process was in manual mode during an event. It's just a matter of configuring the tags that you would like to read, configuring the properties, and then using the event duration. One thing that I'd like to point out also is that I can call the event duration in other parts of the expression. So for instance, if this event lasts, say, 10 seconds, and I understand what the average flow was across the entire event, I could choose to divide that by event duration, and that would tell me the average flow per millisecond. Or I could take event duration and divide it by 60,000. So then I have my average flow per minute throughout the duration of the event. So you can use the event duration not just within the function duration call, but at any other point inside of the expression. All right, let's hit apply. That's still running. And this time, helps if I click on the right thing. We'll hit true. We'll get this running. Oh, looks like I have a configuration error. Let's see where I've done that. Evaluate. Everything looks good. If I have a space somewhere, close out and see if it's still there. All right, we're good. It's cleared. Event in progress is currently going on. So here's the second event. Now my notification is turned on, but notice that there's no property showing. And there's no property showing because until the event has ended, I don't have a duration, so I can't have a property. So now we'll come back in. We'll go ahead and end this. And there's my properties. So I started at 1:43 and 32 seconds. I ended about a minute later, minute and 5 second duration. info@canarylabs.com is who was notified. I did not adjust the offsets, end or start. So this gets used if I'd like my properties essentially to be calculated longer than or shorter than the duration. So maybe I have a process where the 30 seconds before the event are important and I need to capture that. I could do a start offset by 30 seconds and capture the 30 seconds prior to the event within my property calculations. And there's my same thing with the end offset, before or after I can offset. And there's my properties, my average flow, my min, and my max. Let's take a look at a event that I've already configured previously. That's the Canary Water Tower level falling event. So we'll walk through this one a little bit. I tied this to an asset path, my virtual view called Water District Assets. And within that virtual view, I have an asset type, a tower, and this shows that there's 18 towers in my model. The event that we've configured is set to the expression of A. And so when A is equal to 1 is when I start my event. So let's look at this. It's a bit of logic for the expression. If the time average of the tag level, so the level of the tower, if the time average for the last minute when looking 2 minutes ago minus the time average for the last minute of that level, if that is less than 0, then write a 0, and if not, write a 1. So basically, I'm looking for a difference between the level from 2 minutes ago to the level now. And if that difference is positive, then I know that my level is falling. And I express that with a 1. So I'm watching when expression A is equal to 1. That tells me that my level is currently falling and has been falling for the last minute. This has to be true for more than 5 seconds, or I'm not going to start my event. That's the minimum duration field, 5 seconds. And I'd like to know a level delta, as well as calculate a fall rate. You could technically just use the delta function for this. Delta or delta bounds would work. My data is one where I want, because I essentially could have a reset in my number. I didn't want to call the delta because sometimes the delta in this particular data structure is going to be a bit off due to a data generation technique I'm using that basically has a reset in it. So instead, I'm asking for the max and the minimum. So I'm saying, what's the max of the level over the event duration minus the minimum of the level over the event duration. Once that's calculated, then I can get the fall rate. I take the exact same thing. So I understand the delta, and then I'm dividing it by the event duration and converting it from milliseconds to minutes. Now, this one expression, this one event rule, gets applied to all 18 towers. So 18 is my number of assets. Right now, there's 5 active assets that are being evaluated, and there's 1 event in progress. Notice that in my database, I have more than 7,700 events. It's also showing me how many evaluations it's made in the last running minute. So if we take a look at this, again, this is all just generated data, demo data. So there's not going to be a lot of significance in the data, and you're going to see a lot of repeats in the duration, simply because Guadalupe Tower 1, Comal Tower 1, they have the same underlying data source. So there's going to be a lot of duplicates and triplicates here. But again, I've got my start, my end. Now the source is filled out. It tells me exactly which asset this has occurred in, and there's my properties. All right, let's show here now how I can pull this information into Axiom. We'll minimize this. I'm running version 21.5 in version 21, I'm going to say .4, maybe .3, but definitely 21.4 is where you would find events or your event table. And so to configure this, I just tell it the name of the server. In this case, I'm on localhost. And then I can filter based on event types. Right now, I've got it defaulted to all. And so here, within the last 24 hours, let's narrow this down, say the last 1 hour, 1H. I can see all of the events that are taking place. So I could filter this and just say, only show me the tower level falling. I could say, show me only the events process running. And so I'm seeing a reading tag event, process running, and level falling. One thing I've noticed is that I have not turned on properties. So let's see that now. So I can change the type, the source, start. I can toggle all of these. I can also rearrange them. So if duration is one of the first things I'd like to see, I just drag the column order and change it. So there's the properties now showing for my process running that we just configured. And properties are not showing for tower level falling because notice this event does not have an end date yet. If we have more, let's go to 8 hours. We end up with a scroll bar. There's an example of properties for my reading tags. This was something I was messing with earlier today, just in preparation for this coaching session. So really, these properties can be as many or as few as you would like. It's up to you. You can see here on an older event, I had also run standard deviation on a property. So I hope that this was helpful. I hope you get a way to see how to create events as well as how to apply them. You can get much more complex with the event structure. For instance, you could technically, because you're writing this to a SQL database, capture some metadata properties about the asset. Maybe it would be an asset management ID number. So we have, for instance, a client who's using Maximo for their enterprise asset management EAM system. We are reading that system and writing properties to each of the assets that identify the IBM Maximo asset ID number. And so we're pulling that into the event and then able to generate not just an Axiom report, but a link over to the proper Maximo system or Maximo page for that asset. So you can really, because we're doing this in SQL and because we keep it open, between the Canary Virtual Views, the Calcs, the events, and your other applications and systems, you can really tie all of this in together nicely. As always, if there's any questions, we encourage you to pass them to us in the chat, as well as after the fact, if you'd like, you're welcome, of course, to email those to info@canarylabs.com.